hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
What is up, everybody? This is Hater Radio. My name is Chris McLean. I am without a co-host tonight. Just me. Ian is off, but he'll be back probably Wednesday show or whatever. He's got just some stuff going on, but he'll be back. This is a college football media brand. We're dedicated to the sport of college football that we love so much. And this is why we do it. And I hope that you guys are liking it, which it seems likely because we had a goal of getting 1,000 subscribers on YouTube by the end of the season. We are a month and 3 days into the season. And as of right now, literally right now, we're at 597. So we're 3 away from halfway to our goal within a month and 3 days into the season. So I'm extremely grateful for all of y'all. Like I said, every episode, like, subscribe, comment, follow, help us out in the algorithm. Just commenting anything on anything we do, it's greatly appreciated because it puts in the algorithm that people want to interact with this brand. And we greatly appreciate any interaction that you guys give, friends, family, whoever, new people to the show. But with that, what we do each week is we have a preview and a recap. This is the recap show. So we're going to recap all the games that happened yesterday. And there were a ton, especially that 3 o'clock hour. There was quite a few really good games that were down to the last second. I was watching most of them. I pretty much stayed home all day, and watched all of them. But let's start with that Friday game, which was the Illinois-Nebraska game. Now, this game, honestly, I was expecting Nebraska to pull it out. They looked the part for most of the game, like they were going to do it, and Illinois just kept coming after them. Luke Altmaier is Ole Miss transfer. He had 4 TDs in this game, the quarterback for Illinois. They had a balanced attack, 381 total yards, 25 first downs. They were really good on 3rd and 4th downs. Raiola for Nebraska looked great. It was back and forth for a little while. Raiola was making some great throws. Nebraska had a chance to ice the game late. They missed a field goal. There was a huge run by Illinois to set up an easy TD in overtime. And then Illinois just shut them down in overtime. And it was like they started at the 25, like where they usually get the ball, and they just went backwards. And it was like it was nothing they could do. And it was over. And, that was remarkable because, it was such a good game. And it was like, I figured Raiola would have some magic, but he just got shut down. He got sacked quite a few times there at the end, and Illinois wins. And it's a shame that somebody had to win and there had to be a loser. But Illinois right now looking dangerous. That's a huge win for them. I was thinking that Nebraska was going to run through this easy part of their schedule and get the 7-0 to facing Ohio State, but they lose here. They'll have to regroup. They've got some easy games coming up before they have that big matchup with the Buckeyes. But Illinois wins here, and Illinois, they have a lot to play for. It's going to be, a tough sledding, but 4-0 at this point. And, they got Penn State next week, Michigan, Oregon. It doesn't get easy for them. And I think they have one more tough game after that. No, that's it. So just those 2 games, those 3 games, which still are going to be tough. But, the rest of those games they should be favored in. But those other 3, the Penn State, Michigan, Oregon game, if they can just win one of those games, it'll go a long way to getting to a big bowl game. Hey, heck, maybe even the playoffs. Like I said before, this is a completely new year. This is not the same 4-team playoff. Now, the top 20 teams in the country have a legitimate shot of getting into the playoff. So with that being said, let's move on. to Saturday's games. NC State Clemson was the first game that we were going to cover. NC State's defense looks like trash. They just couldn't stop Clemson at all. Klubnik, wasn't amazing, but the run game for Clemson was really effective, and they were able to move the ball proficiently. They had a balanced attack. 254 to 269 was a split total yardage for Clemson as far as running and passing. So they obviously were balanced. There was a lot of mistakes by NC State, 3 turnovers. Just they looked putrid. McCall did not play in this game. I don't know. This NC State team got housed by Tennessee, now getting housed by Clemson. I mean, it was bad. It was like 51 or 52 to 7 at one point. It was ugly. And I feel bad for those State fans because one of my old coworkers back in the day used to go there, and or 2 of them did. And one was like a huge State fan, but I'm sure she's feeling these losses, the one to Tennessee and now Clemson. Clemson just, I don't know what to make of this team because they got destroyed by Georgia. Obviously, Georgia has one of the better defenses in the country, and they've had it for the last 4 or 5 years. And, they didn't score much against Georgia. They only had 3 points. Yet against App State and then against NC State, they put up like 60 plus. So, this team, or 59 plus. So this team is capable of putting up a lot of points. Klubnik, I still am not sold on. He put up huge numbers, 3 TDs in the air and a TD on the ground, so 4 total. I don't know. I don't know what to make of this team. They have a schedule that sets up well for them. The loss to Georgia is not the end-all, be-all because they play an easy ACC schedule where they don't have to play Miami, and literally the only tough team that they have to play the rest of the year is Louisville. So they have one tough game the rest of the year, and Louisville seems to be the one that got screwed out of the ACC scheduling because Louisville has to play both Miami and Clemson, whereas Miami only has to play Louisville and Clemson only has to play Louisville. So Louisville, has to play both. The other 2 only have to play one of the 3. So they got lucky, and they're going to probably be the odd man out. And it's probably going to be Clemson, Miami in the ACC championship game because they both have cakewalk schedules, and they're way more talented than any of the teams that they play on their schedule. Okay, moving on. Florida, Mississippi State. Now, this was, I didn't even watch the game. I was at first airing because I don't know. I'm just so tired of the defense. I don't want to watch them struggle. It's not fun to watch them play. They struggle so much, and it's just, there was 23 missed tackles here again. I just don't enjoy watching defense that is putrid. I grew up watching, the Tampa Bay Bucks defense in the late 90s and early 2000s. And those guys were lights out. They were the most proficient defense in that era, just outside of the Ravens. And they just were always solid week in and week out. They never gave a bad performance. And you always had a chance to win a game because of that. And it's just not enjoyable to watch this Gators team, who on the flip side also have had good defenses over the last 30, 40 years, even almost the entirety of their history have had good defenses. And yet this last 4 or 5 year stretch from 2000 till right now has been the worst stretch of defense ever. And it doesn't get better. It's just been worse and worse every week. They have not played tough teams outside of Miami. Texas A&M is not a good team. They played Bowling Green and barely won. Mississippi State got smoked by Toledo, and they gave up a ton of yards to both of them. Everyone actually, outside of the their FCS game that they played, but that doesn't count. That's not a real opponent. Miami obviously is a very good offense, and we'll talk about that later. But Texas A&M and Mississippi State are not good offenses. Mississippi State struggled throughout the year to be able to run the ball, and they put up let me see what it was. They put up 240 rushing yards. And a lot of it was later in the game as Florida was already up 2 or 3 scores and the game was kind of out of hand. But still, to put up that much yardage on a team that Billy's back is against the wall. So, you would hope that they'd play a better performance, but they still stunk up the joint. They allowed over 50% on third down conversions. They allowed 2 of 3 on fourth down conversions. So they still can't get off the field. They allow them to run the ball at will. And it's not enjoyable. I'm sorry, but I don't know what to say. I mean, this is just, it's a broken record. And I keep saying it all the time. I thought coming in this year, Ron Roberts was like, all right, he's the adult in the room. He's going to make a difference here, but he clearly did not. And, the players are out of position. The play calls are just mind boggling. And then you have certain players like number 12, Douglas, and he's just lost at all times. I will say the linebacking play is better. I love Pup Howard and I love Shamar James. Those guys are great. And I think the D-line is somewhat getting better. The safety play and, Denson had a struggle where he had some good plays and then he was committing countless PIs and, it was a struggle. They still won the game pretty handedly, but it was defensively, this game mirrored a lot of what happened in 2020 when was the downfall of Florida defense was, Florida's offense was scoring at will and then Florida's defense just couldn't make a stop at all. And that was pretty similar to what was going on here. And I also will say with the offense, and I'll talk about that more now, the offense performed very well, 6 of 9 on third down. That's very good. It's finally getting third down conversions because for majority of the first 3 games, they were not getting third down conversions. Pretty even attack, 277 passing, 226 on the ground. Running backs look great. Montrell struggled, had a lot of carries, but didn't put up a lot of yards, had a fumble lost. But Baugh and Jackson and Webb, I mean, I'm telling you, this is one of the better running back rooms in the entire country. And I think, I don't know what to make of what's going to happen with Billy. I mean, we've talked about that in nauseum, so I don't really want to talk about that. I'll just talk about this game and then move on. But the running back room, I think if you can put those 3 younger guys in more, I think you're going to get more out of them. They just look way tougher, way faster, there's more pep in their step. They're angry. They're running tough. They're getting through blocks. They're, making people miss. Baugh is, I'm telling you, man, he's a freshman now. The kid is he's going to be an NFL player. I almost guarantee it. There's no doubt in my mind. The kid is just unreal already at 18, 19 years old or however old he is. But, I really like what was going on there running back wise. Mertz looked very good. And I know it was critical the last couple of weeks, but Mertz stepped up and looked really good. DJ played perfect. Didn't have an incompletion except for, I think there was 1 or 2 that were penalties that would have been incompletions so he technically had a perfect game, or he did have a perfect game because those flags were accepted. But he looked good. He had 2 drives from inside the 10-yard line all the way that ended up in scores. Sorry, folks. It's camera died. I got to cool down the room earlier. I thought I had an hour and a half, 2 hours. It's just too hot. It was hotter today than it was last couple of days here in Long Beach. So not able to get the right temperature. But anyways, so passing attack looked great. Wide receivers looked really good. Badger had a really nice catch. DK had a nice punt return. Who else? Mizell had a great game, except for like 2 plays called back that were in long touchdowns. I mean, he had a great game, and he looks really fast and really elusive, and he definitely looks like someone that is going to get a lot more playing time going forward, which that is exciting to see because they need someone to take over for Trey while he's out. Boardingham made plays. Hansen had a nice touchdown catch. Austin Barber had a touchdown off of a fumble by DJ. The one mistake by DJ was that fumble, but Barber picked it up, so it was a touchdown there. So they win 45-28, but just a lot, to happen in the next couple of weeks. Billy still likely is probably going to get fired, but they have a game against UCF. They have a bye week coming up now, and then they'll play UCF after that. So we'll see. I don't know. Some people were thinking that he'd get fired today. Who knows? If he keeps winning, then maybe they're going to keep him, but it's going to be very difficult. The schedule does not get easier. Tennessee, LSU, Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, all in the top 15, and most of them are in the top 10, top 5. So you are not expecting to win probably any of those games, maybe one if you're lucky. And then you got to win Kentucky, you got to beat FSU, you got to beat UCF, and hope that you can get one of those games somewhere there. And that right there, that would be 5, maybe 6 wins, maybe get you to a bowl game. And I think people would still be angry considering how bad the first 2 of the 3 games where they lost and went 1-2. Okay, let's move on to Kansas, West Virginia. This was a back and forth game. There was a long delay, so there was problems there. Kansas was up near the end of the game, after the delay, and then West Virginia just came back, and they ended up putting up, 2 straight touchdowns. They got a 2-point conversion. Garrett Green looks really good. I don't know if people know about this kid, but he's a stud, and he put up a lot of points here to be able to win this game, and they ended up going up 32-28, and they were able to stop Daniels at the end. I didn't see much of Daniels' highlights in the highlight package, but he didn't put up a ton of yards. He only had 184 yards. Wasn't really that great of a performance from him. Usually he's putting up bigger yardage, and he didn't have that much yards on the ground. So, this West Virginia team is a team to look out for because, their 2 losses that they had were Penn State and Pitt. Those are outside the conference. So they still have a lot to play for in the Big 12 conference wise. And I expect to see them to play a lot of important games going the rest of the year. And, their schedule is tough because they've got Oklahoma State next week, Iowa State, Kansas State, Arizona, UCF later. So there's a lot of tough games. We'll see. I mean, honestly, this Big 12 is wide open. So anybody can really take a place take the mantle. And I think BYU, and we'll talk about later, seems to be one of those teams that might be pretty scary for everyone else, considering how well they did yesterday against Kansas State. And we'll talk about that later. Okay. Next up, USC, Michigan. I cannot believe this game was as close as it was. I called it out on Wednesday's show that I thought that USC was going to have a huge performance, And Michigan's D line just was all over Miller Moss, and he never had like any time at all to really pass the ball and to be in the pocket. And because of that, USC struggled. They were down 14-3 at half, and Michigan only completed 7 total passes the entire game. That is bizarre that you could lose a game holding a team to only 7 completions. I mean, that's very similar to when Florida beat Georgia, and I think they completed 3 passes. And it's just remarkable how sometimes you don't even need the passing game as long as your running game is going so well. And it was, there were like 3 huge runs that Michigan had to be able to, stay in this game. And, they made the most of it. And, Orji, like I said, couldn't complete a pass to save his life, but they were making plays on the ground, forcing the issue. USC stayed with them. They even had a lead late, and I thought they were going to take this game over. And then, Michigan got that late score, and it was just, that was it. I saw a lot of USC fans complaining about the officiating, and it was suspect. There was a lot of stuff I saw, like, face masks that weren't being called, and some of the long runs, there were like holds that should have been called. It's tough. You can't really blame the refs. I don't think Michigan is, like, if you played that game like 100 times, I would think like 90% of the time that USC would probably win that game. And I just don't think this Michigan team is that good. They kind of just got lucky that they were able to get those plays. But again, allowing 290 yards on the ground when they're going to run the ball and that's all they're going to do. I mean, you should have just stacked the box. You should have just put 8 in the box and put 3 in coverage on the receivers, because, the looks of it on their formations, they never had more than 3 receivers out there. And so if that's the case, just have 3 covering people and just blitz everyone else in there. I don't know why you would want to play the passing game at all. I mean, literally it did nothing. Like, yeah, you shut it down, but at the same time, it's like, I would rather take my chances with the pass game than give them any wiggle room with the run game, which clearly they're better at, and clearly they could dominate you at, and they did. Having 300 yards on the ground is huge. It's not the end of the world for USC fans, because this is just the beginning. And, I see, USC bouncing back from this. They have a game against Wisconsin coming up, game against Nebraska, game against Penn State. And, it's going to be a tough sledding, but they could still lose another game and still get in the playoff. Shoot, they could probably lose 3 games and get into the playoff. And it's just because they have that tough of a schedule. They have Notre Dame at the end of the year. I see this USC team bouncing back, and I think they're really going to play better at home, which they've got like the next 3 of the 5 are at home. So they've got a good chance to right the wrongs on offense. Then their 2 road games are Minnesota and Maryland. I think they should easily beat both of those teams. They should easily beat Rutgers. They should easily beat Wisconsin. And the Penn State game will be tough because Penn State's got a really good defense, but it's in the Coliseum, so we'll see. Okay, moving on to UCLA, LSU. Man, I thought UCLA played really great in this game in the first half and into the third quarter, and then LSU kind of just took control, and UCLA couldn't capitalize with good field position and good drives. And it's a shame because Garber's played a hell of a game, and it's, that touchdown throw he had before the half was such a gutsy throw, and I was like, oh man, they're in this. And I wanted to see more of that. It's just they couldn't take advantage of their opportunities, and LSU did. LSU had 454 yards of offense. And they're a good offense. They've been a good offense the last couple of years, and they're going to move the ball. And UCLA only having 14 rushing yards is not good. They for whatever reason, just couldn't run the ball against this LSU defense, which is giving up a lot of yards to a lot of people. And it's a shame. UCLA loses 34-17. And, there's a lot to play for the rest of the year. This is the first year of a new head coach, so this isn't the end of this, but it doesn't get easy the next 2 weeks because they play Oregon at home at the Rose Bowl, and then they have to go on the road to Penn State. So the next 2 weeks are going to be really difficult, and they're going to test the mettle of this team, but they got to find a way to regroup and come back from this stuff because it doesn't get easy. The next 2 weeks are going to be really difficult. But shout out to Richard. I hope Richard saw that game. It was a great game regardless of the result, but we'll see what they do the rest of the year. Okay, moving on to Georgia Tech, Louisville. I had no idea that Shuck was the quarterback for Louisville. It's kind of remarkable that this kid is still around. Like he, played at Oregon for a few years, went to Texas Tech, and now he's at Louisville. And he actually looked really good in this game. He had a really nice touchdown throw for a TD that put him up 24-17. They got a safety after that. Haynes King got Georgia Tech in position for a field goal to make it a closer game. It would have been a 2-point game. The field goal was blocked. It went for a touchdown, and that was pretty much the difference in the game. So it was a relatively close game. And, Tech is still a dangerous team, way better than they've been in the last 10 years. And, this Louisville team, undefeated, besides the Miami and Clemson game, they don't really have tough opponents outside of, they've got SMU and Boston College. Those two are tough, but they should have a pretty decent year. At best they'll go 1-1 against Miami and Clemson, but we'll see. Maybe they do better. I don't know. I don't think so. I think they have to hope for 1-1 against those two. Okay, moving on. Utah against Oklahoma State. So it's funny, like I didn't even realize this because Cam Rising didn't play. I thought he was going to play. They were making it sound like he was going to play, but he didn't play. And Wilson, which is it's Isaac Wilson, comes in. He's Zach Wilson's brother playing for Utah, rival, of BYU. It's kind of funny, but he played all right. He had a couple picks that were not great. But the guy for Oklahoma State, Bowman, their quarterback, he's not very good either. He's kind of just whatever. It was, Keithy had a really good game. He had a Wildcat TD, a late TD to put them up 22-3 with like 6 minutes left. Bowman helped get them to 2 TDs late to try to make this game closer, but there was an onside kick that the Utes recovered, and that was it. But this Utah team, I'm telling you, man, that is a really strong team. I'd say Utah, out of the Big 12 right now, Utah seems to be the best team. And, their schedule is not crazy difficult outside of the BYU and Iowa State game. I mean, they legitimately have a shot at this as well. So they won't play West Virginia in the schedule or in the regular season, but is a chance that you could see like a team like West Virginia and Utah matching up in the conference championship. But a lot has to be played because a lot of these teams are going to play each other, and you'll see a lot of stuff figuring itself out. But I expect Utah to basically get through most of the schedule except for the BYU Iowa State games, and maybe they go 1-1 in that, and then they're just 11-1, and then they definitely get in the playoff. And they have even if they if they went 11-1 in the regular season, regardless of what they would do in the conference championship, they would more than likely get in the playoff. Okay, moving on to Vanderbilt, Missouri. Whoa, who thought this game was going to be a good game? I don't think anybody really thought that they had a chance, but this kid, Pavia for Vanderbilt, is looking great. I don't know if you've seen this guy, but this kid is athletic. He can move the ball, and he's a decent gunslinger. He's not amazing, but he's still good enough to hit open receivers and to make some decent throws. But he's athletic, and he gets down the field, and he's elusive, and he breaks tackles. Just a solid quarterback. Vanderbilt was winning this game and had a chance to win it at the end. They traded field goal misses back and forth near the very end, and it was like, I thought that Vanderbilt was going to win this game. They missed the field goal late. They go to overtime. They had matching TDs in the first overtime. They go to a second overtime. Mizzou hits a field goal, and then Vandy misses theirs to tie it at the end. And just, man, heartbreak. Vanderbilt has lost both the Vatek game and this Mizzou game in overtime, and it's just like, oh wait, no, sorry, they beat Vatek in overtime. So it has been quite a remarkable season so far already for Vanderbilt, where they've beaten a Vatek team and took the number 7 team in the country to overtime and should have probably won the game. It was a remarkable game. Clark Lee is a great coach. I hope he stays at Vanderbilt and raises their profile because Vanderbilt has been so bad for so long outside of a handful of seasons over the last 40 years since I've been a fan. So shout out to them. Congrats on a great tough performance, but it's not good enough. They need to win some of these games, and I think they're close. I really think they could probably win 7 games this year because they have Kentucky, Ball State, Auburn, and South Carolina that they could win some of these games. They have tough ones too. Alabama, Texas, LSU, and Tennessee. So they have almost as tough as Florida does. So let's move on. But Missouri has an easy schedule. And if you don't know that, you're going to see that they only play Oklahoma and Alabama, and they likely will only have one loss for their season for that because it's Oklahoma, we'll talk about it, but Alabama looks pretty unbeatable right now, and I'm more than likely Missouri's going to lose to them. But let's move on to TCU, SMU. Just a beatdown. SMU, a lot of their plays that they made were long special teams plays and pick sixes and fumbles returned for touchdowns. And just they had, I think, 3 different non-offensive touchdowns. And so it made a huge difference in this game because Kevin Jennings, the quarterback for SMU, only threw for 137 yards. For a team that scored 66 points, that is quite remarkable to only throw for 137 yards. It's very similar to when Florida lost to Missouri 10 years ago when Florida was badly injured on their whole roster. And in the game, Missouri had 3 or 4 special teams plays that resulted in scores, and they won 42 to 15 or something like that. And they didn't even have I think they had 180 yards total. It was ridiculous. Yeah, SMU looks very good. They were, in control of this game the entire way. TCU kept scoring though later to make it look closer, but it, 66-42, it never was that close. It was, I think at one point it was 56-28. So it never really was close. But they scored those late scores because there was nothing, they pulled their defense by then. Okay, so let's get into it. USF, Miami, I'm going to pause real quick. Okay, I got the camera back because the temperature's a little bit cooler right now, and I wanted to do this segment on the camera as well. Okay, so Miami fans obviously are very arrogant and whatever, and they're gonna talk trash about this game, and they're gonna be like, "Oh yeah, 50-15." You know, the score was 22-15 at halftime, and USF was on the like 10-yard line and missed a cheap shot field goal, and they should have scored a touchdown on that drive, but they couldn't punch it in. And that's been the story of both games against Alabama and Miami, is that USF has moved the ball well between the 20s, but they cannot punch it in. And that is a problem because um, field goals against the best teams in the country are not going to win you those games. Like, you have to score touchdowns. And, it's a shame because, Atkins had a great game. Byram had a great game. The defense tried their best for a while, but Miami is good on offense and they were able to score at will. And, USF had to keep up. That was the only way they were going to stay in this game, is if they kept scoring with them. And because they weren't able to score, touchdowns to keep up with that score, it avalanched. Second half, once they went down by 2 scores, that was pretty much it. They couldn't really get back into the game. Byram went out at some point in the fourth quarter, and they didn't bring him back, and that was it. The game was over, and Miami scored 2 late scores to throw salt into the wounds, and congrats, you scored 2 late touchdowns when the game was already well out of reach. But you know what? Miami is good. I will say this, that going forward, they have a schedule that is very easy. So they're not going to get tested, and they're going to go into an ACC championship game, go into a playoff game, and they're going to get smacked because that'll be the only time they play a tough team all year. And I don't think they're going to be ready for it because they're playing weak competition all year. But it may actually help them because they're playing such weak competition, they're probably not going to have as much injuries because they're going to be able to put in the subs for the most part. And so they're going to have all these easy games all year. Could help them on injuries on that front, but could also make them weak because they're not prepared to play a tough team. I think in the age of the expanded playoff, iron sharpens iron. And I think that you need to be a tougher team, like in the NFL, where it's, even if you have 2 or 3 losses, it's not that big a deal, because when it comes time to playoff time, you're going to be ready to perform. And I think this Miami team is not going to be ready. And I think they're going to struggle in the conference championship game, and the playoff games that they get into. Okay. And again, like Alex Golish says, you really can't take pride in a loss. It sucks, and you got to move on. There's a lot to look forward to in the season because they have a lot to play for in the AAC. It just needs to be better. There's no depth right now, so it's like they're not able to really contend with these top teams as well as they would like. They played really well against Alabama. They got some turnovers there. They didn't get enough turnovers here in this game, which I thought they were going to get. They got one early, and there was actually one very early. I think the first play of the game, Ward almost threw a pick 6, and that would have completely changed things. So he had some moments where he was going to look like he was going to, make some mistakes, and he does that, and that's why I said that in my video. And some guy on TikTok was talking trash about it. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but he makes mistakes. He has the highest turnover rate out of anyone in the country. Can I not point that out? Is that not a thing? That's a reality. So they haven't played anyone yet. And once they start actually playing teams, like I said, in the conference championship, Louisville, and the playoff game, then they'll actually be seeing the mistakes that Ward will make. Okay, let's move on. Baylor, Colorado, best finish of the night. Hail Mary, just like the 94 Colorado team against Michigan. It didn't win the game outright, so they had to go to overtime. but Colorado wins the game in overtime. Not much to say about this. Baylor was a 3-9 team last year. They're not a very good team. So this isn't that great of a win. You know, having to get a Hail Mary to be able to tie a game to go to overtime against a 3-9 team from last year is not that big of an achievement. So again, it was a great finish, but this team is going to struggle. They have UCF coming up. They play Utah at some point. They play a lot of other teams that are really good, and I just don't expect much out of this Colorado team. 3-1 though, that's good for them. But yeah, they play Kansas State, they play Utah, Oklahoma State. There's at least 4 more losses on the schedule for them. Okay, the game of the night, Tennessee with Josh Heupel coming in to Oklahoma's very first SEC game. Heupel coming back after being fired from Oklahoma staff 9 years ago, I think it was, by Bob Stoops, returns to where he won a national championship for Oklahoma back in the day. It wasn't like a big, back and forth scoring game. Tennessee went up 10-3 at one point, got a safety, 12-3. They were up 19-3 early in the third quarter. Bunch of field goals. They had 2 TDs. Oklahoma comes back later with 2 TDs. It really wasn't that great of a game. Tennessee was in control, though, the entire time. Once they went up 10-3 off that long touchdown throw by Nico, that was pretty much it. Tennessee never really looked back. Their defense is strong, but I think Oklahoma's offense is just very weak. Arnold got benched. Hawkins comes in, played well, but I'm not the biggest fan. He was kind of serviceable. I think he's probably better than Arnold, honestly, which is a shame because Arnold was a much ballyhooed recruit, and Arnold just did not look the part. But Hawkins looked better and gave them a chance at the end. If they had gotten the 2-point conversion, it would have been a 1-score game, but they missed the 2-point conversion and then didn't get the onside kick. So that was it. So Tennessee undefeated, 25-15, passes their first real big test, a road game against Oklahoma. Tennessee has a bunch of tough games coming up. They've got Alabama, Florida. Well, Florida won't be that tough a game. It's a home game too. They've got Alabama and Georgia. So really, actually, those 2 games for Tennessee are about it. I can see Tennessee going probably 1-1 in that span, which for them, that's huge. If they go 1-1 in there, they have an outside chance of getting into the SEC championship game, because I think Texas is probably going to go undefeated, and I think Alabama probably goes undefeated, depending on what happens next week with Alabama, Georgia. But yeah, so look out. Tennessee could get in the SEC championship game and then get a spot in the playoffs. So let's move on to the last game, and then that's it. That's the end of the show. BYU, Kansas State, close game early, and then the end of the first half, Kansas State just falls apart. There was a minute something left, and I'm like, oh, I'm watching the highlights. I had no idea what the score was, and I'm like, okay, let's see if they get to the half. And it was like a calamity of errors, like fumbles, interceptions, and BYU just converts all of it and, makes all these big plays. And it was just remarkable. I'm like, wow, BYU was not really doing much in this game. And then all of a sudden just took over. They were up 17-6 at halftime. Kansas State gets a field goal later, and then BYU just put it to them. Retzlaff for BYU, not amazing, but enough to get the victory. Avery Johnson for Kansas State struggled in this game, 2 interceptions, and BYU wins 38-9. BYU, like I said, undefeated. Look out for them. So BYU, Utah, state of Utah might have a real shot of being the Civil War, might be the actual who gets to get into the Big 12 championship. They might even play that game, one wins, and then they might both of them have to play a rematch later on in the Big 12 championship, and then that might actually decide who gets in the playoff, which would be crazy to see both of those teams from the state of Utah getting in, and then having one of them beating the other to prevent the other from getting in. Okay, let's go on to. That's it. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's it. So that's the show. Last thing I wanted to do before we go, forgot to shout out to our sponsor, the Kenwood Bar in St. Pete, refurbished bar. It's a great little spot to catch a game. It's on 28th Street in St. Pete, between 22nd Ave and 13th Ave, right near the Home Depot and Lowe's there. The owner is a USF alum, a friend of mine that we've known each other for a very long time. He's a restaurateur of other bars and restaurants in St. Pete, but it's a great little place. So if you get a chance to go there, but that's the show. We are Hater Radio. Look for us on haterradio.com for all of our articles. I might have something coming up soon. And then for all of our social media handles for X, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok, it is at hater_radio. And then for Facebook, it is Hater Radio CFB. For YouTube, it is at Hater Radio. That is the show. My name is Chris McLean. I'm glad you watched. Stay with us. We have much more to come this year. There's a lot of show to go. The playoff, expanded playoff, there's a lot to go on. So enjoy these games coming up. We'll have the show on Wednesday. Like I said, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. You can catch it on all the social media formats or on YouTube later for the rewatch. But you guys have a good night, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.